Hello, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Macro Podcast, where we go behind the scenes in the cheese world to chat with the people making, selling, or distributing your favorite specialty food products. I'm your host, Janae Muha, certified cheese professional, longtime cheesemonger, and producer advocate. Going to food shows like the Fancy Food Show is always a great way to connect with the cheese industry, and sometimes you walk away with a truly intriguing connection. That's how I felt meeting Raymond Siebrits from Klein River Cheese in South Africa. South Africa has had a long history of keeping livestock and fermented milk products, but has only been cheesemaking for 100 years due to, in short, French and Dutch colonialism. During apartheid, cheesemakers were required to sell their cheese directly to the government, leaving little room for innovation or artisan products. Since the fall of apartheid, a growing artisan cheese community has bloomed, especially in the Western Cape. I'm excited for you to listen in as I drill Ray with all of the questions that I had left over from Vegas, and hopefully there's a few answers to your questions also.
So my name is Ray from Klein River Cheese near Cape Town in South Africa, and I probably got into cheese as randomly or unplanned as almost everyone did, sort of fall in love and get bitten by the bug. My in-laws ran Klein River Cheese for a number of years, and through that we got exposure to the industry and the business, my wife and I, when I say we. And yeah, when we matured ourselves enough and saw what a wonderful industry it was and just how amazing the community around cheese and dairy in general was, we fell in love with it and decided to join the family business. That was seven or so years ago, yeah.
So what does the cheese making scene look like in South Africa? Like, I am completely at a loss for what it would even look like. So can you paint us a little picture of like how much cheese is being made in South Africa and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, sure. You're not alone in sort of it being a bit of a unknown. Um, so people are quite surprised whenever I meet them in the US, who I'm assuming most of this audience is, that there is even a cheesemaking or dairy sector in South Africa. So South Africa's got a wonderful established agricultural economy. It's very industrialized in many cases, in many places. We're a population of about 60 million people. Dairy is a staple in the daily diet, daily nutritional structure. So you'd be having cheese with most or many meals, milk, yogurts, etc. And yeah, we're a net exporter of dairy as a country, mainly to our neighboring countries, sort of Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, even up to Zambia, Kenya. We do some exports over the ocean into Australia and into the Far East. But very little into the Western Hemisphere or into Europe at the moment. And we've got three major milk sheds in the country with three different climatic zones. So really interesting diversity of milk flow coming through the country. And our dairy tradition is, fundamentally based on the Western European model. Generally started out as smaller herds, a lot of consolidation happening in some areas, and like I said, in many cases, industrialization with small artisanal cheesemakers still trying to do their thing with their passion and their craft, and an emerging scene of that opening up, I think, as more interest in food culture and food heritage is growing in South Africa. We're seeing a lot more small artisan cheesemakers trying their hand at the passion, and like us, falling in love with it as well. But yeah, it's a big industry. We've got big industry associations and big lobby, for better or for worse. We've got annual dairy awards. In fact, I think I stand corrected, but I think our South African Dairy Championships, as it's known, is it claims to be the oldest continuous running in the world. It's been running for about 110 or so years. Without pause, it even carried on through COVID. They managed a fascinating remote-ish judging system, and we get about uh, 1,000 odd cheese entries every year across the full spread of categories. Right from bulk commodities through to hyper specialties. And then it obviously includes other dairy products, milks, butters, yogurts, etc. So that's quite a centerpiece or showpiece in the industry every year. Big agricultural shows showing off everything from home cheese making kits to mega combines for corn harvesting. And it's a dynamic sector. It's really fun. It's growing from strength to strength. The dairy industry um, is on a constant growth path in South Africa, and it's just it's a real privilege to be part of it in our own small little corner.
Well, speaking of that small little corner, tell us all about Klein River Cheese.
So Klein River Cheese is 30 years old this year. So we made our first tiny batch of cheese in 1994, which is also the same year as South Africa became a democracy. So it's really cool that our story follows the history of the new South Africa, or the free South Africa. Um, Started on a family farm, still on the same farm in the same facility, by the founding family, who were a dairy family and decided to do a little bit of value add. I think this story is not uncommon anywhere in the world when you're running a small herd, and you're near a village. We're near a village called Stanford. Um, Population about 10,000 people. It's a sort of arty food heritage uh, architectural gem in this beautiful region, and yeah, demand for bottling some milk, or can you make us some yogurt, constantly comes around. And this founding family decided to try their hand at cheese making. And interesting enough, they looked around in the market and decided and looked at what was a relatively popular cheese that no one was making domestically, or was being imported. So what could they substitute? And they decided to learn about how to make Alpine style cheese from their Jersey milk that they had on the farm. And yeah, the first few small batches were made, and it took off from there, and slowly was built year after year into an established creamery. About 10 years into the business, the family sold the milk herd to the neighbors and stopped milking on site. And that is still the structure of the operations today, where we don't have our own dairy herd, but we buy all of the milk from our neighbors, who milk about 200 cows. So effectively, it's a closed herd. I wouldn't call it a farmstead creamery. I'd call it a valley-stead creamery, if that term exists.
You just
So
made
it's
it,
all
so it exists
there you
now.
go. Just made it. It's all in the same. It's all in the same small catchment of this little river where all of the milk comes from. So it's the same microclimate, soil structure aspect. The terroir is all very specific to the Klein River catchment. The river flows through the farm that we're on, and it's called the Klein River, and that's what gives us our name. And yeah, as I said, we're in this beautiful little corner of the country. We're about 2 hours outside of Cape Town. Cape Town is, a phenomenal international tourist and local tourist destination, and it's got a, a vibrant culinary scene, very established, 500-year-old wine industry, making New World wines second to none. Um, and so having an artisan cheese business, near or within that is it's a really cool location, uh, and there's a lot of passion around that type of food. We kind of describe ourselves as like we're like in the Marin County area to the Bay Area. So we live. we live and work sort of the best of both worlds. We've got a really nice market near us, but we can be out in the countryside and not be bothered by the hustle and the bustle of the city. Um, we all either live on the farm or live in the village of Stanford, which is 5 miles away. So all of our team and the family all come from the same area. A lot of our family work in the business, as well as sort of other team members are family members. So we really do define ourselves as a family-centered business. And with my wife and I being sort of the third generation in the company, we hope to be able to do this for as long as we can on the same and in the same place. And it's a real privilege to be uh, part of the sector. And we do see ourselves as custodians of everything from our specific little food efforts and food heritage that we've created, as well as custodians of the land around us. Don't get me started talking about the catchment and river and our passion for trees and environment around us. That's a whole nother story.
Well, it's a story we like, so
It's what drives us. It's our purpose.
how many cheeses do y'all make, and like how many employees are work there on a day to day?
Hmm. I'll start with the latter. So there are 35 employees in the team. Um, and it's not necessarily because we're massive, it's because everything is uh, extremely manual, unmechanized intentionally, as well as South Africa's unemployment is 39%, which most people can barely comprehend how this system can function, but it is one of our major challenges as an economy. And so, one of our missions is to provide as many opportunities as possible, and in a way, keeping a system unmechanized and traditional allows for that. Um, it also means our cost of labor as a country is relatively much lower than developed economies. So we are able to support and absorb as many families as possible. So 35 people, like I said, some live on the farm, others live in the village, and very young team, and very exciting to always be part of a young team. Our average age, I think, is 32 or 31. Um, and our head cheesemaker, he has been in this senior role for 12 years. He apprenticed under the founding cheesemaker for about 7 or 8 years before the founder retired. Um, and what else about the team? As you know, near and cheese, everyone works really hard, but is really passionate about it. Um, there's no rest in cheese making. We we've really focused on being quite specific around what we make. So we only make hard and semi-hard Jersey cow's milk cheese, and so one sort of category pretty much, and we make 12 different styles within that. And they would include we make a raclette. We're the only South African producer of raclette style cheese, of a Havarti style, of a Danbo style, and then our flagship is primarily our brush rind Alpine style cheese, which we sell at we mature to 3, 6, and 12 months, depending on the customer and the taste profile. So it's really cool. We often have sort of vertical tastings and multi-age experiences around our flagship, and that's about half of our production is um, that brushed rind Alpine style, which we call Gruberg.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. We met in Vegas at the Fancy Food Show,
Mm.
and you were talking to me about the issues that you've had around that specific G word that I've noticed that you were very careful not to say. But yeah, you guys sent some cheese to a competition under the term Gruyere and it got flagged. And now you have had some issues with um, that term. Can you talk a little bit about that and however you feel comfortable?
Yeah, no, of course. So we did historically name the cheese Gruyere, and that's on the public record. Uh, it is inspired by the Gruyere tradition, and uh, and we take a lot of our inspiration from the small batch methodology around how it's made. And this was a long time ago, so before my time even. And we every year we enter our cheese into the World Cheese Awards in Europe. Our entire catalog we comes at huge logistics and time and expenses. Anyone who does cheese awards knows, primarily as benchmarking and to receive feedback from judges. And I can't remember, it was 2013, I think, 2012, 2013, we won Best Gruyere in the world because we would enter it into the Gruyere category. And that coincidentally happened to be a similar year. I think it was the next year where South Africa and the European Union, European Commission started ratifying or enforcing their joint trade agreements, which uh, what's it called, naturalized the GI terms. So the GI of Gruyere became protected in South African territory also. And so we had to change the name. And it actually was a wonderful opportunity for us to rethink what is this product, what have we developed, and what is so popular. And we got an opportunity to create our own unique name, Gruberg, which we were able to trademark and protect. And um, and now we're able to talk about it as a uniquely South African Alpine style cheese, which is also quite an interesting phrase. It's a bit of an oxymoron because an Alpine style is quite a generic concept. It's a huge category, and now we're saying it's uniquely South African. So that's what I think a lot of the terroir and understanding of what our actual production and purpose is here brings to the table. And it's interesting when really experienced palates taste the product. Almost immediately, they can identify the full recipe structure, uh, the style it's made in, peeled and brushed rinds, structure, rough age profile. But then they stop and they go, but wait a minute, there's a whole concept going on here that I've never tasted before. I can't really place um, its provenance. I can't really understand actual milk structure, and that's exciting when I hear that. And it certainly makes me confident that it is uniquely South African, and that our pasture structure, as I said, the geology in the soil, and even the subset genetics of the Jersey cows. There's a relatively global genetics group, but are quite unique to what we're doing. So we celebrate the fact that we had issues with the G word. Um,
You created your own G
um,
word.
and created our own G word. There we go. So it's also been interesting following the stories around that in the US recently, the use of the term and the generic. Obviously, there's a lot of Gruyere, Le Gruyere sold here in South Africa. It's a household name. Um, it's on it's well represented across most culinary training and recipe books, etc. So it's a wonderful competitor to have, if that's the right way to look at it. But I also see it as a wonderful compliment that we can see ourselves in the same category and basket in the marketplace as this incredible industry of Le Gruyere. Um, but then for consumers or chefs looking for that South African angle, that unique flavor structure that comes with ours, I think it does have a really special place. And we are wanting to sort of build the passion around that.
That's awesome to take something that could be difficult to manage and turn it into a real positive. You've kind of mentioned the climate around where, or like the terroir and whatnot
Mm.
around where you're making cheese. And I know that you said you have a river running through it. What else does it kind of look like? What does the pasture look like? Like, can you paint a picture? Because I don't know that a lot of
Mm.
people would have like a picture in their head of what South Africa would really look like in a agricultural sort of way.
Yeah, sure, sure. And South Africa is it's an incredibly diverse country geographically, geologically, and also climatologically. So for our specific region, you would start off and say, you know, you could imagine the Basque region, for example, sort of Mediterranean climate. You've got sandy, acidic soils, relatively mountainous, and right on the coast. So for us in our catchment, you know, we're 10 miles from the ocean. It's a colder ocean, kelp forests, you know, the village next to Stanford, Hermanus, is the whale watching capital of South Africa. Every spring, migratory humpback and southern right whales come and calve in the bay. Spend a lot of time there in the sheltered waters. And then these sort of, you know, dry, low shrub mountains surround these ocean, these coastlines, covered in very specific vegetation called fynbos, Fynbos, fynbos or fynbos. It actually means fine leaf or fine bush because of the small leaves that have adapted to hold moisture in the hot, dry, windy summers because of the Mediterranean climate structure. Hot, dry, windy summers, and then cool frontal um, uh, winters. You know, similar climate feeling to the central coast, I suppose, of California. Um, but the vegetation type around us in the Cape area is quite phenomenal because it's at the end of the continent, as there were different climate changes. What's the word I'm looking for? Climatological epochs, ice ages, etc. You know, it was put under stress. The vegetation type, you know, got smaller, bigger, and so a lot of endemism, a lot of indigenous types of plants grew around here to the point that fynbos is now it's a very small area. It's probably, let's call it 500, less than 400 miles in diameter. Is its own floral kingdom in the world, and you know, it's the most diverse floral kingdom in the world per square mile, and so it's got a wonderful, you know, heritage around botany that's specific to the climate and the soil here. So if you take a bit of the Central Coast, a bit of the Basque region, add in a unique coastline um, with some mountains and some beaches, you start to get a bit of a picture. It's not hugely, let's say, aggressive or dramatic from a landscape point of view. Mountains are, uh, you know, 1,000, 2,000 feet high with some exposed rock, and then these lovely, lush, low bushed slopes. And then here in the valleys itself, you know, you'd have meandering rivers, some small riverine forests, and then in our dairy area, you know, either natural cuckoo and fynbos pastures, and then some would be multi-seeded pastures, you know, lucerne and rye. And just near us is another sub-region, which is a very productive wheat, a winter rainfall wheat region. So it's got uh, shale rolling hills. So you suddenly go into this different agricultural region with just hundreds of miles into the distance of wheatland in winter, which is spectacular. And then in summer, it's dry. It's not irrigated wheat. And just these beautiful rolling hills, brown everywhere, surrounded by a backdrop of mountains.
Well, here
Oh,
I
how
go,
was that
buying a
painting?
ticket to come and see you
How was that
because dang,
painting?
that sounded
Yeah.
that sounded pretty idyllic and I want to be there.
Yeah, temperate climate also. So, you know, we don't freeze or frost here in winter. You know, we'd be like 10 degrees above freezing at the coldest. And obviously it's quite wet. Uh, and then in summer, right now, in midsummer, late summer, so we'd be peaking at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's just windy and there hasn't been rain in a few weeks. So it's a big fire region also, that, like many areas in the US in summer. So the fire risk is a major issue in the sort of state forests and the mountains. But it's interestingly, fynbos, this botany, I shouldn't talk too much about botany, but it's a passion of ours as a family. It's actually evolved to survive with fire. It actually needs fire every 5 to 10 years to reseed and for a lot of seeds to germinate. So its natural survival mechanism is to burn. So there's a lot of managed and controlled fire programs that need to happen with all the land.
Well, the thing about botany is that without a lot of these things we don't get milk either. So
There we go.
we want to hear about what the cows are eating and how that affects everything, and that's
Yeah,
all part of the
yeah.
picture.
The important part of the picture, and we intentionally, so we don't use any silage in our feed structures. At all. So it's open pasture only, and in these 2 months of midsummer we do some dry feed from winter baling, um, and there's no, I don't know what you call it in the US, when cows go into the barn for winter. That doesn't really exist in South Africa. It never gets that extreme. So the cows are out in the pasture pretty much the whole life, and it's a very simple, very low intervention, um, dare I say, regenerative, if I want to use a buzzword, um, style of pasture management.
We love a buzzword. Um, that's all amazing, and I'm so glad I get to hear about it because I met you in Vegas, and like
Yeah,
I that's this is what I love about the cheese community is it's you never know who you're gonna meet.
I agree, and we're so excited to be, you know, tentatively uh, talking to people in the US about what the future might look like, just doing a little bit of sales, um, being able to introduce the story of our country. Um, it's not about us Klein River Cheese. It's about our flag that we want to fly and tell the story about this part of the world. And it's just so exciting meeting people like yourself. And every time I go and visit, go to a show, or go on a tour, I just meet such interesting people in the cheese sector, and it's inspiring. The US sector, the US economy is 100 times bigger than ours, so there are 100 more interesting people than there are in South Africa. But there's just a real dynamism and drive around, especially specialty artisan dairy and mongering in the US that we have here, but as a microcosm compared to what's going on in the US. We're just inspired by it. It's wonderful.
It still feels really small inside of it here because it is a very like specialty foods is a large category, but then even
Mm.
down to the cheese world, um, you know, we end up all knowing each other.
Yeah,
It's a,
yeah.
it's
I hear you. I hear you. It's not that big that it becomes a you lost in the sea. But I
right.
think there's enough people and enough um, innovation and I say passion and creativity and dynamism that there's a real buzz around it. I mean, you have a conference, you have a magazine. I don't have that for special for artisan cheese in South Africa. We're I'd say one of um, mm, probably five, let's say 10. I'd say 10. There's probably 10 commercially active artisan cheese producers in South Africa. When I say commercially active, they're selling to, listed national retail and food service and cheesemongers. And there must be about 100 cottage industry makers who would sell at their farmers market, their weekend market, and maybe a monger in their village. But as far as just slightly larger, having a few more systems, uh, it's a very small community. It can be quite lonely at times.
All right, I'm gonna
I'll come
shift.
to ACS one day.
Yeah,
Someone
please
set up.
do. Please
Someone set
do.
up. It's just Just come. It's the most fun you'll ever have at a work function.
Honestly, I agree with that. It's a lot of business gets done, but it's also like dancing and fun and educational
Oh,
sessions where you're going to learn so much. But just being able to connect with everybody, it's a really special time. I mean, I've been active with ACS for the past 10, 10-ish years, a little more. But it's my favorite time of the year. I love it.
that's great. That's great. I mean, and it's just it's say what people want. There's obviously a lot of generalization and critique around what is the American psyche or zeitgeist or approach to the world. I just find that in the cheese world in America, it is incredibly welcoming and open. Anyone I talk to, any door I knock on, any creamery I pull into just unannounced, it's arms wide open. How y'all doing? Come on in. You do what we do. Let's share stories. Have a coffee, have a beer. It's wonderful, and that is something that stuck with us as a family. That you know there is this openness and abundance mentality that we really have tried to also uh, maintain here. So you could be very proud of that as an American, with all the problems that there are.
And I think that has a lot to do with it too, is that most of us see the bigger picture of what's happening in the United States, and this is our like way of grounding ourselves, I guess. I mean, that's how
Mm-hmm.
I look at
Mm-hmm.
it, is like, watching all of these things around me that I don't agree with that are happening all the time. And I have to find a place that grounds me to what I
Mm,
think is my passion, and something that I'm looking around at all these other people who are doing all of these wonderful things, and it centers me in a
mm,
like
mm.
not a doomerism sort of idea of things,
Yeah,
that like
no, and
everything is going to
the complete
shit.
opposite. No, and the complete opposite. There's opportunity. There's purpose. There's community, and like you say, it's very grounding in that sense. We
That's
need
why I
more.
stay in.
Please save the world.
If only it were that easy. Not that cheese is easy, but
No, I know what you mean. If only everyone would just um, listen to us.
um sort of along those lines, you had kind of mentioned at the beginning when you were just talking about the start of the company that it was in 1994, and that was also the same year as apartheid ending. And I
Yeah.
just kind of want to talk about that a little bit, and like I don't know, it's such a broad topic that I'm trying to find a way of like discussing it, but I don't know,
Mhm.
you probably have a way of discussing it just because you probably have to answer these questions a little bit more, especially when talking to
Yeah.
Americans who maybe don't know. But how kind of has that affected your business? Would you say over time? Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess just if you have any thoughts about the past 30 years and how that pertains to what's happening in South Africa.
Yeah. It's a topic that every South African is passionate about, and one that's very close to my heart. I'm a child of the new South Africa. I'm 37, so I was 7 years old when I remember my parents voting in the first democratic elections in the country's history after centuries of colonialism and brutal racism. Um, and it's difficult having come from a white background in South Africa and having to understand the privilege that we've got. I come from a white male privilege background too. It's incredibly difficult um, uh, space to try and harness that privilege for the benefit of others. To try and understand, my place within that, and I'm still figuring that out. And it definitely is what drives me on a daily basis to try and understand my place in the society better. I mean, you're asking a question that's so pertinent this year because we are having a general election, um, and this it's a highly contested and topical one. There's all the same challenges as what the US is facing this year with your general election, from um, misinformation to extreme populism, uh, attacks on democracy, and very disappointing leaders everywhere. So it's very, very front of mind right now. And South Africa, as a child of the new South Africa, we also like to say we're a child of Nelson Mandela, Madiba, and we're inspired by his principles of opportunity, non-racialism, of redress, of affirmative action, of balance, but also of not going to the extreme to do something, and then there's unintended consequences everywhere else. And I think while South Africa got off to a fantastic start in the first 10 years of democracy, it's been a very rocky road since. There's been just disastrous, shocking, disgusting corruption in all spaces of society, from business to politics. Um, and there's a lot of introspection happening now about, where's this gone wrong, and how is this project uh, failing? Where has it failed, and what do we have to do to correct it? I think um, you know, I'm very privileged that we've got, and I'm very focused on the fact that we've got probably the best constitution in the world. As a country, we got a chance to write it from scratch in 1995, and it's not something that has just been uh, added to or chipped away for centuries, as many countries have had. Um,
A little
and
bit, a little bit here.
yeah, a little bit here and there. And our constitution has been tested and tested and tested, and been attacked and been strengthened in many ways for 30 years. And that's something to just keep focusing on, and just to, I talk to the team a lot about this when there's difficulties in our societies, and people struggling with everything from obviously still racism, inequality, xenophobia for immigrants or migrants, which is a major reality and challenge in South Africa, with a lot of uh, um, lesser privileged neighboring countries. Many more work opportunities here in South Africa, so you can see parallels to the US there. But the opening line of our constitution is South Africa belongs to all those that live in it, and we try and live that out every day and make those opportunities for as many people as we can. It does drive us, but it can be difficult. It can be very, very difficult, especially now on this 30th anniversary. It's our company anniversary. We're going into general election. You look at democracy around the world and how it's struggling. What can we do? We can support constitution building, independent free media, um, uh, focus on our mission as a family, protecting the environment, making amazing food, and trying to stay humble. I think that's also, when one does come from a history of privilege, and uh, uh, you know unfair opportunity, one must be very, very humble about that, and be very vocal about it. Um, so it's a wonderfully complex place to live, but I wouldn't want to live, or can't imagine doing what we're doing anywhere else, living anywhere else. It's quite amazing. We see a lot of people when traveling. I don't criticize it. I just giggle. Some people say, well, you say you're South African, but are you really South African? I was like, yes, you're South African. Were you born there? I was like, yes. Uh, but were your parents born? I'm like, yes. I'm like, but you're white. I'm like, yeah, but our history is a lot more complex and uh, a lot more depth than what might just meet the eye in today's media. And uh, I look forward to being a custodian for as long as possible and dying in this country.
Well, I feel like we have a lot in common in terms of like the United States also is a very complex place, but gets flatlined in a lot of
Mm.
discussions across the world of like who we are as
Unfair so.
Americans, and what is happening here. So I totally get that. Yeah. And thank you for
Unfairly so.
talking about
So
it.
it's
It's a
our,
big topic, and um,
well, you asked a generally broad rambling question, and I think I gave you a generally broad rambling
and
answer.
I appreciate that because I didn't really know exactly what to say either, because I am incredibly ignorant about the history of South Africa. Just very something I need to look more into and not be as ignorant about it. So that's a whole that's a whole thing, you know?
The whole thing on its own, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an anomaly in the African continent in many ways, for better or for worse, from its own history. We have 11 national languages, secured and recognized in our constitution. Yet our lingua franca is English, um, and of the more British version of English as being a British colonial territory for a long time. So that doesn't really make sense in many ways in a country that is, got 10 other languages and is, I can't remember the right statistics now, 85% non-white. Um, but the celebration of other languages in South Africa is phenomenal, and the protection of it is wonderful. More can always be done, but yeah, it is, language and being able to communicate in your home tongue is a human right, is a right in South African protected constitution.
That's pretty amazing. And I'm like, now I don't really know how to move out of that, but we're just gonna do
All right.
this.
So I think where I was going is we also have a relatively, commercially a Western diet, a Western, retail structure. You walk into a store here and you're pretty much going to find similar aisles and baskets, to what you'd be finding in the United Kingdom or in the US. You know, uh, Most of our media is influenced by, the what we call Anglo-Saxon mindset. However, there's just amazing African of origin or, First Nations of origin riffs around that. So it's a really funky place, I think, to be living from a culinary or an arts perspective. Yet, a lot of people are quite surprised that it's like, oh, it's actually quite, Western, so to speak. That's to use a better term. So we like to think of ourselves as in Western. Sorry, I dropped something there. Western heritage, but, global South driven.
Well, and 30 years is not a long time to come out of something so oppressive too. So
Yeah.
like people are still just kind of getting their footing, I feel, in terms of like
Oh yeah.
what is this culture going to look like going forward?
And we're still finding our feet in all aspects. I think the most important part is just don't trip up.
Yeah, that's the ideal, right? So what's next for Klein River Cheese? Like what's on the docket? Are you guys got new cheeses
Yeah.
coming? Or are you just trying to expand a little bit more into the US market? Like what are you just going to keep doing what
So,
you're doing and
so the
make
US
it good?
is a huge, scary project for us. We we've always wanted to export a little bit of our product, because we want to share it with the world, and we think there's an interest for it elsewhere. Um, and we're looking around the world as to where should we start. And the US was an absolute no-brainer, top of the list, not just because of all the great things I said around how there's a big appreciation and a fantastic community around it, and it's just such a large market, for one access point. So, but to figure that out is really technical and scary for a small business like ours that's never done it before. So that's like the main docket right now is, um, you know, get a small amount of product into, uh, some of the most celebrated cheese counters and restaurants in the US, and that would just, be wildest dreams come true. And the product hopefully and obviously needs to speak for itself. But yeah, figuring out everything from logistics to FDA, to how distribution in the US works has been is an ongoing. It's a wonderful challenge. I'm loving it. And then within our current system here, we've just started making some butter. So I'm really excited about making some specialty French style butters for hopefully one or two of our local retailers. Um, and then, you know, we've got a project of possibly looking at making a blue star cheese in the next couple of years. And so I'm going to have to start really doing some travel to figure that out first. This is the way we learn first, is to go and visit places that are doing it and talk to people and understand why they're doing it, and really develop a grit for that. Grit is not the right word, but sort of understand the granularity and the texture around a product or an idea before being naive enough and brave enough to tackle it yourself. Um, yeah, so but a lot of it is sticking to our knitting. We know, what we're good at. We've been doing this for a long time, through all the ups and downs. You're not in the cheese industry to make money. Um, it's a passion, but it has to be stable, and it is. It's a stable, uh, uh, humble business that mustn't throw out what works. But we're excited. My wife and I are excited to add some nice little capabilities onto the company. So US, focusing on specialty butter, looking into a blue cheese, and to be honest, the world of cheese styles is our oyster here because no one else is really doing these types, especially in South Africa. But so if I wanted to make a spruce wrap, wash dry and a smear wrapping cheese, no one doing it. But I also have to make a market for it at the same time, and that's really tricky. I need to think about, who's going to buy this? Is there enough of a demand for it? Again, what is being consumed locally? We've got some great specialty cheese counters, and one really well-respected national retailer, very similar to Whole Foods or very similar to Marks and Spencer's, um, and fantastic consumer that supports that. But are they going to want to have a seasonal wrap and spruce wrap, Russian Monteau style? Maybe only a few hundred. Is it worth really going down that road? I don't know. These are the kind of questions I'm trying to figure out. Um, um, and
Those are some big questions, honestly.
Yeah, some big questions, and they're all driven out of curiosity and out of passion, not out of. I know they're driven out of naivete as well. Just saying, I don't know how this works. I don't know what the market. I don't know how to make it. Let's go and figure it out. Um, let's go and look into it. And many times decide, no, we're not going to do that. And uh, funny, when I kept asking in the US last year, what should we focus on next for the US after our Gruberg, our Brushland Alpine style? The feedback was overwhelmingly like, we want stuff that's really African, like South African themed, like you know, bring on the safari. So we did start testing some concepts and some products around that sort of African animal inspired rubs, colors, and different labels and whatnot. So it's a little bit outside of current um, our current brand. So we might start doing that. We might start looking at some spices and botanicals from South Africa, either as inclusions or as rubs, and doing that specifically for the US market, and maybe one or two of them will actually be appropriate here too. So that's also, I think that's quite a fun, unexpected angle that we're going to start working on. Like we took to Vegas, we took this really weird South African, I mean, did you taste the South African
I did.
green mango pickle or green mango ferment? Yeah, and the feedback from that was overwhelmingly exciting compared to what I thought. So I got home and I was like, oops. I said to my family, I was like, I don't know what have we done. I don't know how to do this now. How do we scale this up into sort of an exportable product? We just took it over um, as a fun, what do you have you ever seen this? What do you think of project? And now it seems like we actually have to do it properly. It's a product my brother-in-law makes, and he's on the literally the other side of the country. He's like 1,000 miles away. So I need to figure out how to get him to make it for me in a slightly larger quantity and get it here and pack it and find the right branding for the US. But that's exciting. We love agro-processing. My family, my wife's family, we've all come from agricultural and agro-processing backgrounds, multi-generation, either primary or value add. So what more fun place to be than dairy agro processing, and in this case also some sort of fruit processing.
Yeah, it was delicious. I loved it. And it was like nothing I've ever had before, which I think most of us are always looking for that kind of fun stuff. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was very I was watching really closely like how gimmicky is this? It's people are like, oh, that's fun and interesting, but I'm never gonna have that again. It's like interesting idea, but whatever. Um, but it seemed to be the feedback was a little bit more. It was a little bit more deep than that. It was like, oh, that's actually quite. I could see myself pairing it with this, and then I could eat with that. And it works with cheese. So yeah, that got me really interested to try output further. Note to anyone in specialty food or value, don't take a fun toy product if you really don't think you can do it. Have some idea on the next step.
word to the wise, word to the wise.
No, I think it's also it's quite exciting. It's quite fun. It's quite there's nice entrepreneurial um, opportunities there. Create something completely new.
Absolutely. We love it. So I always ask people some kind of quick fire questions at the end here. So
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with those. The first one is, what is your current cheese crush? Like the favorite cheese you've been eating right now?
Oh, um, I can't believe he's gonna love me for this. A Rumiano dry jack, um, because a good friend gave me a good piece in Vegas, and I brought it all the way home, a nice big piece, and it made it on the long flight. And
Perfect.
we don't get a dry jack here, so that's
That
great.
is uniquely Californian. So
Yeah,
no, you're not going to get
traditional
that.
as it comes.
I am very partial to the one with peppercorns in it.
Oh
Um
yeah, I
because it
saw
tastes
that.
like potato chips. It's like salt and pepper potato chips. That's what it tastes like to me. And it's
Is
just
it?
like super easy to just keep eating it because it's so
Mm.
addictive. So I'm with
And it
you
seems
on
up really
that.
well on the palate. So you can just you can keep going, keep going.
Delicious, delicious. What's your favorite pairing? Like your favorite thing that you just kind of go to all the time as can be anything. Jam, booze, whatever you pair
Yeah,
with cheese.
I'm a big beer fan, and we've got a craft brewery down the road here. They make a honey blonde, and so there's a lots of wonderful food around us. There's a wonderful honey processing facility, and next door to them, and so they use a lot of that honey in this blonde style brew. And I love pairing it with our Gruberg. I'm always just snacking on our young Gruberg, 3 months. Um, it's also really easy eating, milder flavor and texture, and just goes so well with the honey blonde.
Perfect.
And I mean, because it's a brewery down the road, and we actually happen to have our own little farm shop at the brewery. We don't have it on the farm ourselves because we're a bit out of town. The brewery is next to the village, so it gets a lot of good tourist foot traffic, and we've got a little shop there. So we're often there, and there's always a honey blonde and a piece of our cheese in the refrigerator. So it's an easy go-to pairing.
I love that. And then if you could just
I have to
recount,
also say that that acha, the mango pickle, is also because it's a family product.
yeah, to throw that in there since you talked it up so
I
much
had to
too.
throw it in there. It's pairing really well at the moment with our raclette, believe it or not.
Oh yeah,
Especially
I can
when
totally see that.
especially when melted. So we have a little tabletop raclette grill in our house, sort of those with little wands. Um, and whenever we're on a farm, so it's quite quiet. And whenever we have visitors from the city, friends from the city, we're like raclette party time. And so it's that with the acha.
Yeah, I could totally see that because like the tartness can kind of cut through some of that fattiness when you're
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
melting the raclette.
And you got the
Yeah,
nice sort of ferment from the raclette, from the mango pickle, also working with the sweeter raclette. Yeah.
delightful. And then the last one, if you could recount one of your best cheese memories. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a time that you were eating cheese. It could be just a time that you were around certain people, but just something that really sticks out in your mind as like your go-to sanctuary cheese place.
Um, my wife and I were really privileged many years ago when we were starting out uh, to make really close friends and go and work a season with Andy at Uplands and go next from Rush Creek. And I just remember flipping and patting for hours at a time and starting and packing. I remember we started like a rap song with the team for a while, and it was just. And he reminded me of it when we bumped into him in Vegas, and he's like, "That song you guys made up, based on the sticker that's on the side. This rind grows natural, blue and green, blue and something mold. This rind grows natural." Blue and green like mold, and we just kept this like riff going the whole way through while packing and sticking. And when I saw the video, it brought me right back to standing there, um, uh, you know, in a wonderful community of people. It's just a wonderful memory, and that was definitely part of our early journey in um, really getting excited about doing what we're doing now. This rind grows natural. Blue, right?
It's amazing the things that happen when you spend hours just doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's what I read an article recently. Someone wrote about a boxing flow, getting into your flow and making up boxes. Um, it was
Yeah.
exactly that. We were getting into a flow with the song as well. Whenever I make up boxes here now, also I just like I can do it for hours, just making boxes.
Well,
Only
I
cheap.
think I told you, but I spent the month of October also at Upland. So I am very familiar with all of
Yes,
those things. I
yes.
made a lot of artisanal boxes myself. So
You got your flow going.
yes, definitely.
But yes, that's definitely just stand out as one of the great memories. Learning to rap to a spruce sticker.
I mean, I look back through my photos of that month and the amount of photos and videos I have of just the cows when they were in front of the cheese house and like just that being able to like drive into work and like the cows are just right there hanging out and
But
like I don't know, it was that is a special thing for me too. I have so many pictures of just the cows out in the pasture. Like so
no,
many.
no, and I mean, and he definitely inspired us on many aspects around that same openness, welcoming, sharing perspective, which we saw everywhere else. And, definitely is a ambassador for that.
Absolutely. Well, how can people find you guys?
Uh, well, hopefully in a good cheesemonger in the US soon.
Just
We've only just started like 6 months ago getting exports going. Klein River Cheese .co.za is the South African uh, URL for our website, and then have a nice look at our Instagram. There's lots of good pictures of cows there too, very calming, romantic ones. And I will be hopefully coming to the summer fancy food show, and I don't think my family's going to let me stay long enough for ACS. But if anyone wants to come and say how's it, which is the way you say hello in South Africa, how's it at in Javits Centre of all places, it would be lovely to meet more people in the sector.
Sounds great. I will add all sorts of information into the notes of the episode too, so everybody can find you from there. Thank you so much for talking to me. Like, it's been really interesting, like just getting to understand South African cheeses and what you guys are doing. It's really cool. This is what I love this industry. I'm always learning something new about somewhere else, and it's really awesome.
No, thank you so much for the engaging chat, questions. It was wonderful to meet you a few weeks ago, and so nice we could have a proper, uninterrupted conversation without anyone else bugging us. And yeah, just to also learn more about what's happening in your world in the US. I think it's just fantastic. Excited to be part of it in some small way.
A huge thank you to Ray for taking the time to chat about cheese in South Africa and all of the pieces surrounding it, good and bad. This podcast is recorded, produced, and edited by me, Janae Muha. Musical credits to my husband, Ben Muha. If you want to continue the conversation, find me on Instagram or Facebook. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite listening platform so more people can find this podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep spreading the word of good curd.